It is this deliberate weave with other people. And when we weave in these different ways, we listen, we turn and we fold and we circle back, all of a sudden we create this lattice work where you feel held. And if you take a lattice work, within that you have your own piece of it, your own unique part, but it's netted and nested in a fabric of others, and they're all unique. And I feel that we are threads that seek to be woven together.
Welcome everybody back to the How to Be Human podcast. I am delighted today to all you Hedge Schoolers who are listening, because we have the Hedge School founder and creator himself, Steve Brophy, joining us today. Steve?
Hello. I have listened to so many of these, so it feels like reconnecting with a long lost friend, and we've been writing letters to each other for as long as can be, and now we're finally meeting, and the intertwining of our signature sounds. I love it.
I love it too. Thanks so much for being here with us. Thank you, first of all, for starting Hedge School and allowing your writing and your passion and your curiosities to lead you through that, because through your curiosity was where I found a lot of my curiosities into these How to Be Human questions. You asked a simple question: what questions walk with you often? And when I heard you say it, because I mostly listen to your Hedge School, these questions about how to be human just came right out of me. And I wrote them down on a pink notepad and was like, okay, I don't know, there's something here. And we chatted about it. And it's almost been a year, almost coming up this summer, been a year. So I just want to thank you for all of that.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. And I wanted to honor, because writing can feel like a lonely existence. And there's a reciprocity that's required where the writer needs the reader, the speaker needs the listener. And what I felt with our conversation is we've just always held space for that. And what I've loved is the evolution of that question as it's walked with you. And the intertwining of your souls that you ask the same questions, and then just how it's grown into it needs to be spoken alive. And so that's what I've loved. I've loved it. It's just the questions have taken you on this beautiful journey that who knew what would happen 12 months ago?
Had no idea. Thought I'd just be writing and listening, and it's turned into a podcast. And the even more fun part, hearing other people answer the questions and getting to dance with them and their answers as they inquire about it. The questions seem to breed even deeper inquiry. I seem to get follow-up questions from the people I talk to and whatnot, and who are reading the podcast. So it's just an open-ended conversation, and it changes and we grow, and it's really been beautiful. So thank you for inspiring that. Definitely.
Absolute pleasure.
Today we are filming actually it's March 30th, 2022 for me. It's March 31st, 2022 for you, because you're in Australia and I'm in the United States. And you just happened to this week officially released, I think it's your first, but your first book, Alight and Lament. And when I saw you release that, I was like, hallelujah, the man has done it. Could you tell us a little bit about Alight and Lament, and what comes up for you when you think about sharing that with the world?
All right, so thank you. It's been a birthing process, 16 years in the making. Probably 10 of those were blind. And the book, Alight and the Lament, is play on words. So when you say alight, it gives you this feeling of being burnt alive. And lament has that power. And for me, then when you split and you go, light in the lament, it's actually finding through grief hope and light and a way forward through the darkness. And so it's inspired by the death of my 21-year-old brother, who I've written about a few times in Hedge School. And the Celtic proverb, death happens in the middle of a long life, it was one of those ones, when something lands with you and it just burrows. And his death was tragic. He was 21 years old. He died on a United States soil. He died in Georgia in a car accident. He played for the University of Georgia. Just a beautiful young man. And I was cruising through life, and then it happened. And then I went on this journey. And Alight and Lament is a tribute to not him. It's actually a tribute to grief. And it's my digestion of grief, which you've just recently spoken about. So it's really pertinent that we're talking about it, because it was the only way that I could really move through it was to speak alive his story. And it was through that cathartic process where I started to feel it, release it, move forward. And I kind of inched up the mountain. And then the more and more I started to write about it and express it, the more I found poetry, the more I found prose, I found like-minded souls, the more I felt that I needed a light to start the conversation. And the book is deliberately small. It's 84 pages. And it's my journey through grief. And it's an evolution, like an alchemical journey. And it shows you the darkness, and it doesn't hide that. And then it shows you the kind of like being stuck, but knowing that you're about to transition. And then it moves to this ascent, this I'm coming out the other side, but I still have all the scars with me. And what I appreciate about death now is that it can animate life, really. Because you think about if you're in a car and all of a sudden somebody swerves and your heart just jumps out of your mouth, and you're as alive as you can be because you brushed death. And one of the challenges we face with society is, especially Western society, other cultures do this much, much better, is as soon as you talk about death, people are like trying to apologize out of the room and really awkward. Or you connect with somebody who may have had somebody close to them pass away. And then there's just this, you tie yourselves together. Like my brother would say, my brother Aiden, you're a member of the shit club. And you understand and appreciate what it's going through. And so what I wanted to do was to broker better dialogue about death and to honor it, and to honor the work that people like Stephen Jenkinson do, where they die wise, and really, celebrate life for the fact that we get to live it, and honor the fact that death is a movement to somewhere else. And so Alight and the Lament is just a glimmer of hope for people who may be further back in the stages of processing their grief.
It really is. Talking about grief is not huge to, do. And it is something I actually did this week. And even, viewership for it is less. And I even had a moment of feeling like, oh, I talked about the shit again, put it out there. Nobody wants to hear the shit anymore.
Yeah.
But until you need to, and until you have to, you don't understand. You really do. And it really helps us. And learning how to digest or process our grief is one of the best. It could be grief of death of a loved one, or just the small traumas in your life that have happened. It processes all of that. And that helps you become clearer and whatnot for the rest of your life, more creative, more abundant, more reverence for your life and living. That's what I've come to know as processing grief in my own journey. One of the things I really enjoyed about your book, Steve, was, you released it Monday, and I went out and got it, and I ordered a physical copy, and I also got the Kindle copy because I was like, I want to read this thing. And I stayed up Monday night and I read the entire thing front to back.
Thank you.
You are welcome. And I was sitting there at midnight at the end of it, and I was just like, trying to digest it myself, but I was like, I gotta go to sleep. But I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how you were gonna lay this thing out. I haven't seen any of your process of it and whatnot. And one of the things that surprised me was the way you were able to take the small bite-sized chunks of your lived moments and experiences and weave them with your own poetry, and how we kind of went back from your lived experience to poetry, lived experience, poetry. And I thought it was a beautiful way to bring a human who's, reading and listening into the grounding of your experience. And then poetry is such a beautiful way to like say the things that we can't really say, that don't really make sense, that we are sensing, but like you just got to churn it through. So I really appreciated that different journey of the entire thing. And I was curious, how did you come up with that?
By accident. So I had two books going. I had a poetry book, and I was writing this book about my brother, and I became stuck. And the stuckness was, it became his story that I wrote, and I really couldn't find my voice in it. And then when I was chatting to a dear friend of mine, Leslie Lau, and Benny Wallington, who we both know is two beautiful human beings, they both said, it feels like a hero's journey when we laid out the poetry. And I was like, so I printed them out, and then I just kind of laid them in order. And I noticed that there was this, and I just randomly dropped it into a Google Doc. And when I saw them laid out, I'm like, yeah. And then I'd taken a couple of days off work, and then it just came out of me that, there's no string to tie these together. And the string that I have, I wrote that about that part of this, his, as in response to this. And that was about this. I'm like, well, I've got to provide some context. And then it just continued to grow and grow. And then I guess in a way I was hiding behind his story. And what it allowed me to do was to find mine amongst it, and to present really grounded moments where I'm having a massive fight with my wife and we're on the edge of divorce, and presenting that and to go there's no sugarcoating this, and it's raw, and it's really, really vulnerable for me to put it on paper. But it's so real, and I remember it, and I can be transported there. And then the poetry for me, like you said, it gifts people a way to put themselves into the story. So it takes you up out of my experience into a collective language experience, and then you can tune into the phrases and interpret it. The same way if you read a book, you would play the movie in your own head. And so part of what I liked about that is you kind of have my first person experience, and then you have a third person combined experience through the poetry. And poetry's got no rules, so it just appeals to the punk rocker in me. And it was not a language that I was used to writing in up until a few years ago. And then it's just become the language that I felt most comfortable with. And I've just found more of my voice in it. And so I just went with it. I went, all right, this is what the universe feels to write. And then I unstuck myself, and then it just started flowing.
I love that. You unstuck yourself. One of the things in there of like, I wouldn't have thought that you just started writing poetry a couple years ago. I mean, the poems feel like you've been doing it forever. So who knows? Maybe you've been weaving them in the back of your mind for a while, and they just came out onto the page now. But I really enjoyed it, and thank you for sharing it with so many people. We will link to the resources to Alight and the Lament below. You can receive it, a paper copy or a Kindle copy, and read it and let us know what you think. You can comment at Hedge School or wherever you find this podcast. Steve, before we get into the how to be human questions, I wanted to just kind of touch base on who you are and where you are now. Just to give, I know a lot of Hedge Schoolers know you, but just to give a little context to our new viewers with the How to Be Human podcast of like, who are you and what are you up to in this world?
Okay, so tiny little question. And I like to, this is a question that I guess I've apprenticed to for quite some time. I am Irish born, so Bardic soul, really tied to country Ireland. And I moved to Australia, to Wurundjeri country, which is where I'm from, where I'm living at the moment, and connected with probably two countries that have lived in quite a lot of tension. And they're also countries that sing alive their story. And very much, I guess, if I'm to, who am I? I am somebody who is apprenticing to listening so that I can remember more of who I really am, more of the 7-year-old, the 6-year-old, all of the things and the weird and wonderful and unique things that made me me, that I was really too sensitive to hold when I was little, that I probably left behind. And that process for me is deep listening, it's embodiment, it's connecting with human beings, it's expression. And I'm finding that that's helping me be the steward of an idea that I call signature sound. But really it's David White says this best, it's like writing the one line in the book of the world that only you can write. And I guess what I'm doing is I'm practicing the art of listening so that I can find my one line. And the more I do that, the more I realize that I have really good ears for listening and holding space to people. And I really like it because, like a good question, when it's folded back to you, that question just keeps folding back and folding back. And I've loved that you've taken your questions and you're apprenticing to them. And so I am a deep listener, an apprentice to really deep questions. And it's, I guess if I was to look at a mission, is to witness more human beings and help people find their way back to that person. And who they really are is really a collection of stories. And maybe I'm a restorer.
Ooh, restorer. I like it. Restorer who helps people remember. I like it. Great. Thanks, Steve. All right. You ready?
And I'm going to delete all pre-prepared answers and just let be
yes,
what emerges.
This is your version, the man who just published a book that he's been working on for a long time, who is a great listener, who has brought curiosity and questions to the world and is coming from this space to share with us how to be human. And what to you, Steve, is the best integration of humanness?
For me, the best, so the word integration is jumping out at me. So this morning, my dear friend and our dear friend Benny Wallington and I hosted a session we called Seeing You at Source. And it's designed through questions to witness people. And what I see with integration of humanness is imagining that we're all threads. So this individual, beautiful strand. And then when you integrate humanness, it is this deliberate weave with other people. And when we weave in these different ways, we listen, we turn and we fold and we circle back, all of a sudden we create this lattice work where you feel held. And if you take a lattice work, within that you have your own piece of it, your own unique part, but it's netted and nested in a fabric of others, and they're all unique. And I feel that we are threads that seek to be woven together. And the weave together doesn't need to be on a human level. I feel like it's on a sentient level. Like, part of when I was writing the bio for the back of the book, I wrote I don't live here. I'm in relationship with Wurundjeri country. And it's like that's a weave with the place that I live. I have my trees and I go there and I weave and integrate I guess my humanness with the sentientness, because I feel that part of coming together that is the integration. And the humanness is just having the space to be held, to be that, to be all we are.
One of the things you said there about being a part of, I'm not going to say it right, a Wurundjeri land?
Wurundjeri.
Wurundjeri. Being in
Rolls off the tongue.
relationship.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I get stuck on it too. It's like, blah, blah, blah. Slow down.
Being in relationship with, it just sounds so much more delicate than saying, I live here or I own this, like your stake is in the land and you're not going anywhere. And it's got a sense and a feeling to it of passing through, like you're the thread passing through, and you are a steward of the place that you are in relationship and passing through, and it moves. And even those hand gestures of passing through and moving are completely different than a steadfast kind of poke in a space. I really appreciate that, and it moves with your notion of that we are threads, and moving and getting woven together by. It reminds me of a picture. I think her name is Autumn Sky Art or something. I can link to it below. And it's a piece of art with the globe in the center, and it comes out with threads coming off of the globe. And all you can see are hands, different colored hands, all the way on the edges of each strand and thread. And the threads are woven together and they're all connected to the earth. And it's just this sentiment that you're saying here. And I really like it resonates for me that our connections and our creations, are mostly in this sentient space. So I'd be curious for you, Steve, what does that mean, the sentient space, and how does that operate in your life?
So I'll preface this by quoting Martin Shaw. He says, like, relatedness is how we wake up. And I love that because it's such Courting the Wild Twin is a book that has continually, it's just a gift. He's just a beautiful writer. And if you look at First Nations Australians and Indigenous cultures across the world, they don't see inanimate objects. They see the animateness in everything. That which breathes you breathes me. And when you delete beyond layers, what is breathing me is breathing you, has birth, like whatever that is, source, God, whatever you call that. And to me, I'm agnostic in that space, but I just have this, whatever's doing that's doing it to me too, because I'm not sitting here going, breathe, breathe. And so the sentientness is really, I guess it's what Jamie would say is beyond the pale. I don't know. I don't really know, but all I know is I know that I don't know. And so when I sit in these spaces and I just surrender. So for example, there's a beautiful space that I go to in the Darabin Parklands just near my house. And in amongst this Australian bush is this palm tree. It just sticks out like a sore thumb. And it's over this beautiful river, and it's just there, like full, like, look at me. And it's standing up, its arms are out and spread. And it's just beautiful. And I sit there at that, and I just do a process called sit spotting. And I just surrender to the wisdom of that tree. And I've developed a relationship with it. And it seems odd and weird. And it is. And I'll put my hand on my heart on. People walk past, they're like, but things have just happened when I sit there. And maybe it's just the space to let the world be. Maybe it's just synchronicities, maybe whatever it is. But all I know is that when I put my heart into that place and I hold it in reverence, the world is just a little brighter for me. And so I never professed this to other people, that this is the way to be. But all I know that for me, it honors the mystery, it honors the magical, it honors the magic, the IGCK of the world, is that ethereal part that we just don't know. And that's what I love about it. And so the sentience of me is, man, you know what? When I was little, I thought that my teddies came to life when I went to sleep. I'm pretty sure they rocked out, because I'm like, I didn't put you there overnight. And I just want to go back to that dreaming a little bit, and to ground it in an experience. My wife's mother is terminal cancer at the moment. And so death's been sitting at our table. And she said something. So when it's approaching, and you have conversations with people who are just approaching the threshold, you get these revelations. And she said the other day, she's like, I just want you to know that when I'm gone, and then she went on to something else, but I just couldn't go past the word gone. And it just went, but you will never leave. Form will go back to earth, but spirit and soul, or whatever that's not gone. It lives on. And so I put sentience in that space. It's a big wall of, I have no freaking idea, but I'm going to believe, and I'm going to hedge my bets that there's magic in it.
I love that. I had an experience of sentience this last week, and it had to do with my most recent Hedge School post, which was about processing grief. And I actually wrote that the week before, like a week ago, and then I edited it later. And as I was writing it, this word came out of me, and I couldn't even spell it on the page. And I had to look it up, because I was like, is this a word? Like, it wanted to be there. And I'm like, I don't use this word. I don't know why it's there. And so I looked it up. I'm like, oh, it's a word. And I've never used it before. I don't see it much. So I wrote it in. Boom, boom, boom. And then I was reading your book, and all of a sudden there was the word. And the word was, I don't know if I can even say it, perturbation. Perturbation. Like, I can't even quite say it. It's not, I don't use it in language or form or sentence, but it wanted to come through me, and it wanted to be on that page as part of the post. That was the first part. And then throughout several other places of the post I kept talking about signatures and this, signature sound thing. And I'm like, I don't talk about this. I don't know what it is. And then again, it was in your book. And I was like, for me, in the sentience of things, is you and I are working together on something, co-creating in a space. We don't know where, we don't know when, but we're linking up on some things. I'm just like, and when I read it, I was like, boom, there it is. It was pretty cool.
That's magic. So perturbation was something that, so this is the centropic world, Christine McDougall. It's channeling Bucky Fuller's work. And it's a principle of nature. And what it means is that we build energy. So an easy one to describe it is, when you know that anger is brewing, and then you get to that point where it's like, boom, I've crossed the line. I can't control it. It's out. And it's like this rise of energy. So perturbation is this rise, 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 rise. And then all of a sudden you cross a threshold and you're different. And it's this explosiveness. And so it happens with volcanoes. It happens all throughout. It's just a steady principle of nature. And for me, that process is like when I think of the greatest flow experiences of mine, I used to have this really odd relationship with anger, but actually anger was in there. That energy just built. And then I surrendered to the experience, and I just went, fuck it. And I went for it. And that's perturbation, is that experience. And so it was just this beautiful language of like, oh my God, that's what that whole experience is. And it's like skill challenge ratio. We can talk flow about all, but as soon as we kind of put pressure on certain things, which is why like constraints, like time constraints, are like perturbation. This is why we do our best work with the deadline coming up, is because we need to focus the energy, and all of a sudden it just, and you're like, whoa, that's the best piece I've ever written. And you could have been writing it for 3 weeks and got nothing done and nothing's happened, but all of a sudden perturbation takes over. And then signature sound. So that's born out of, you take the word, the etymology of signature, it's your sign of nature. So it is you and delightfully you. In I think Buddhism is called, or Taoism is your original face. Like it's the sound that makes Lara Lara. Like people are, oh my God, that's just, only you could have done that. Only you could have created that. Only you could have shared it. And most of what we try to do is we it's mimicry. Like, oh, that's pretty cool. I think I'll find my way in by copying. And we do that as a default mode. It's a safety mode. But signature sound is really you at your original source and finding our way back to that.
It reminds me of the zone of genius. So somebody being in their zone of genius where
Absolutely.
all of their things align up and boom, almost perturbation happening at the same time, signature sound.
And like when you said, I don't know where that word came from. And this is where the art of listening comes in, because often we're just channels for something wants to come through. And if we're good at listening and we honor it, like if you're in the flow, stay in it and just let be what comes through. And it's that process where I don't know who said those words. That's not my language, but all of a sudden it's on the page. And I'm like, huh. And then we get really like, oh, after the fact, we kind of go logical brain and we'll like edit it and we'll do this. But if you can honor the source material, and I often say this to our dear friend, Rob Grunbeck. I said, oh, Rob, where did you go? I said, that, because it's like, da, 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 boom. And then there's just this moment where they channel something and you witness it. And then we have this responsibility to reflect that back and say, and this is where resonance come back, because it's like you get, when somebody's hitting a signature sound and it's tuned into you, you get hairs on the back of your neck stand up, your head's nodding, you're doing this, yes, yes. And that's where the world needs more people singing their signature sound alive.
100% to that. Absolutely. Well, if we are going off of signature sounds as a human, being more human, perhaps, how do you think, Steve, that we could intentionally engage all humans to be more human and living in their signature sound?
So this is I'll start with practical. And this is a space that you live and breathe in. It's being in our bodies and embodiment. So you think about this, like let's take the notion of microcosm and macrocosm. So we have the outer universe and then the inner, the whole notion of microcosm, macrocosm is our inner universe is just a small version of that. And you're the only person who gets to witness that experience. So the first step is being in our bodies and being in and truthfully in our body and tuning into our intuition, tuning into the signs that our body's giving us, tuning into the fact that you get to have that experience, only you. And how can we move our bodies? How can we recover? How can we fully just take the Porsche out of the garage and just drive it beautifully and go on all these beautiful destinations? So embodiment is the first thing. The second thing I would say is spending time in nature. Really going to spaces where it's big sky, big ocean, big forest, and detaching and just being swallowed by the size of it. Because there's something magical about the insignificance of us, because and the impermanence of us, because in that you can find the fact that you are significant. So why not do the things? And if you are the only person who can write this line, well, why don't you write this line? And sometimes the best way to do that is to not do anything, and it's just to fully be and be present and spend time sitting. So the greatest experience of listening I've had is I did a vision quest where I sat on country in Australia for 4 days without food, distractions, anything. I just slept outside. I shat my pants like with the noises in the dark, it was snakes, it was all of these experiences. And I went there with a question. And the question that I went there with is, why do I surrender my strength? And so what you do is you're apprentice to this question. And so I listened to this question and I kept repeating it over and over and over and over. And then in the end, hiding in the question was the answer. Surrender is strength. And then I was like, okay, all right. And so I surrendered to the experience. And that's the next part, is to be in the moment and surrender to moments and not be thinking what I could be doing, what I need to be doing, because we are really heavy on that side of it. And for reciprocity to take place, we just need a balance. So be in your body, balance the books when it comes to doing and being, and then just find what breathes you alive. And that's usually, we would do a flow history, a play history. We'd backcast. We'd go back through the back catalogue and we'd pick out those moments. I love playing guitar. I love listening to heavy music. I love playing basketball. I love co-creating with a group of people. I love reading beautiful books. And then you just kind of pick out what Michael Mead calls your clues. And he calls the clues using the ancient Saxon word CLEW. And it's a ball of thread. And you just pull on that thread. And all of a sudden you remember your aliveness. And then you get back to those things. And then you just play. Have fun with them.
Boom.
That's it. And the rest is, who cares?
Everything in between. So get in your body, get to big nature, somewhere where you can see expansively, whether it's a mountain, river, lake, ocean. The third one, play.
Yeah. So clues and play.
The clues.
Yeah. So the clues give you a place to play in. Like if you like music, put on a banging playlist. Pretty simple. And these are very similar things to what Flow Genome Project do, which with your hedonic calendar. Really simple, but they shift state. And what it's doing is that this altered state helps us come back to, it just gives us different vantage points to look at. And play is just this, it's a natural state that we share with many, many sentient beings. So be more playful.
Be more playful. It's almost like all those practices, getting in your body, doing the things that you love to do, going out and seeing nature are the clues that help you remember your signature sound. Like it becomes clearer and louder, and that beat of the drum, that ding, that strum, and then all of a sudden you're playing a song and there's words to it, and it's only a song that you could play or that you could write. It's really beautiful, and engaging more humans to be in that space, play in that space, move towards that space. I don't know if it's a striving, but a co-creation, because when I'm in that space, it inspires you in that space, and when you're in that space, I feel inspired. It's this reciprocal dance, and then all of a sudden the things that we're doing aren't for work or striving or production. It's to have fun with each other and play.
Totally. And yeah, we'll co-create. And I was speaking to Warren Roberts, who has this beautiful movement in Australia called Yarn Australia, and he was talking about this Western obsession with like due dates. And he said in First Nations culture, as soon as we put a due date on, nothing gets done. So we say, take the due date off and everything gets done. And it's this notion of universal timing. And it's just a surrender to what will be. It will unfold as it needs to unfold, be in it. And when you're really in it, that's when we find those resonant moments. And some of my deepest flow experiences are with other human beings, where it's just all of a sudden we've just created something. Like, whoa. So we were a channel. We were situated in place. We honored it. We honored the presence of each other. And then we allowed what needed to come through because we were all tuned in. And that experience, it's better than money, any of those elements. It's just like, And I remember writing songs with bands I played in, where I'd play something at the start to warm up, and then all of a sudden, like the beat would drop in, and somebody else would find the notes, and then you just have this, and then at 40 minutes would have gone past, and you just went, oh. And I still remember that, like I've fully, that's a visceral, like what Martin Shaw would say, it's a rememory, like it's etched deep in my bones, and we just need more of those.
I like it. I like it. Who do you, Steve, are the best examples of being human? What are their, who are these people and what do their practices look like? So people that inspire you, that are really human.
If you want to go to a human school, go to like an early learning center, a kindergarten, and be schooled. Kids who will just stand next to you and let a fart rip and not even flinch. Kids who'll say, what are you going to be? Oh, I'm going to save the world when I grow up. Like it is you before we put on conditioning and labels and everything. And it's so like an example of that is my son is my master teacher. So I've got this beautiful connection with my daughter, and it's a different connection, but my son has these old soul moments where he'll say something to you and you're just like, oh wow. And you're just floored by it. And there's programs, I think there's a UK program and there's an Australian one as well, where you've got these elderly and these little kids coming together, and it's kind of a meeting of the start and finish of life. And there's something about that when you're close to source at either end that starts to tune you into something bigger than us. And so I would say, speak to those on their deathbed or speak to those just near source. And everything in the middle is a process of remembering our way back to those. And some of us are lucky is that we find ourselves connecting with other human beings. We go on inquiry, we do the work, and we surrender to it. But I find that those are close to source at either end are beautiful people to apprentice to.
I love that. And it sounds like you've got both happening with your mother-in-law and whatnot. And how old is your son?
He's 7.
Oh, prime. Is there anybody else that, who's either perhaps in the middle part of life that their practices have inspired you or have helped you remember your own remembering?
Oh, there's a long list. So I'm going to speak to just a few of my favorite writers, because for me, like, language is a technology, and it's a technology that's just, it's just, my world is enlivened by it. And I kind of dedicate myself to hand selecting language and offering it as a bouquet. But John O'Donoghue, who's he's passed away, is an Irish wisdom scholar. He was a priest, but he's just this spiritual teacher. And he wrote a book called Anamcara, and I reference it in my book. And Anamcara is Gaelic for soul friend. And he died when he was 52. And what I loved about him is he very much talks about being in pilgrimage and being in pilgrimage in place. And so he goes on these walking places. And what that has inspired in me is a practice that another friend of mine, Leon Cossa, has gifted, is this notion of apprenticing to your 5 miles. So this practice of tuning into place and just your local place. So what are the trees? What are the animals that are like, what are the names of them? Like, really being in relationship to the place that you call home. Not as like you said, put a stake in the ground, but being a steward. Hey, know your neighbors. Oh, notice the patterns. So for example, at the moment, we're shifting to autumn, and the birds out the front of my house are going nuts way earlier than they normally are. They're like, oh, it's like they're busy planning, like, oh, it's like we got shit to do. And you just notice that. It's like, oh, that was different to last week. And I've noticed that the 2 magpies that live out the front started kind of like being less prominent in the front yard. So I would say that that process of a pilgrimage to your local area, tuning into your neighbors, and even if it's just getting to know your actual neighbors. We don't, like in Australia, I'm not sure what it's like in the States. We're very closed off. And I'm guilty of that. And part of what I would say is that what that gives you is it's an experience of life at your front doorstep. And it also tunes your ear in. It's like, what do I notice? And when you go on a walk, and I'm sure there's walks and runs and things you've been on many, many times, can you find new color in those spaces? And that is just presencing. So yeah, John O'Donohue, and also another author in there is Martin Shaw for me. Martin took that practice of apprenticing to 5 miles and spent 100 days in the bush in a tent. And so many of his books like Scatterlings and Courting the Wild Twin have come from that experience. And what's happened is you go in there and you leave with a different language, because human beings have had a real long relationship with nature. And at the moment we have this disconnect. So I would say starting to apprentice to nature as a practice, and finding those nature teachers, whoever speaks your language. It might be indigenous locally to you, it might be indigenous to your own culture, it might be people who lead Vision Quest, whatever it is, but finding ways back to nature, because it's in nature that you hear your sign of nature.
I love that. I love apprenticing to the 5 miles. It just makes me think of like, there's so much more that I could get to know in this 5 miles around me, and taking a look at the trees. What kind of trees are they? What's happening? And one of the things that you said, this is why I love talking to people all over, is it's turning into autumn for you. And for me here, it's turning into spring. So we're like on these opposite ends of things happening, but we can still sit here and connect about what's going on in our lives and whatnot. So cool. I like it. All right. Okay, next question. What are easy reminders to be more human when some around us are walking and talking a little less human, perhaps more programmed, conditioned?
All right. So we are all storied beings. So we are a collection of stories, and many of those are made up. In fact, there are many fiction. But everybody has a story. And the great thing about stories is that we can situate ourselves in a story. So when I read a good book, I'm in it. I can see myself in the story. I find the spots. And so with Alight and Lament, people will find spots in the story where they're right in it. Yeah, because there's a resonance to it. So I always say is to find yourself in the story. And then the story is, for some people, it's probably a story that they're stuck in, or it's a story that has the light turned off. And then to find and empathize with that. And if you can just be in their experience and understand what that would feel like, just for a slither, then you can appreciate what it's like for them at the moment. And I feel if we don't have deep empathy and care, even when people have been total dicks, like especially when they've been total dicks, then we have work to do. And I'm a work in progress, and I don't always do that right. But I find that pause and then, because Robert Bly says it beautifully when he talks about, we're all carrying a long black bag behind us. So you don't come into an experience and go, I'm going to be a dick right now. You often carry many stories, many traumas, many things into that moment that have crescendoed into that experience, that perturbation we talked about. So can we find ourselves in that story and see the light in it? And then can we hold space for that? And then with holding space, is maybe that's enough. Maybe we can offer a hand. Maybe we can offer a gentle ear. Maybe a word. And maybe it's standing at ground and saying that, like, that's not acceptable to me, but I appreciate where you are. And this is where tools of conversation come into it, and how to navigate polarities and things like that. But they're the things that it's in that moment. Can I see myself in them? Can I pause? Have I been in that moment before? And what might have led to that? And that gap then gives us breathing room. And that's where I feel it comes in together.
I don't think I've ever heard it put that way before. I think you probably beautifully mapped what it's like for empathy, or an empath who just naturally swoops through someone else's story, is in their shoes, and then comes back out and whatnot. And sometimes it's hard to differentiate your own story from doing that and whatnot. But what I saw when you said that was, if you're talking with someone or something's happening and you feel like they're running a story, that pause to find yourself in the story. The story with that other person is completely different than my story. What's happening to me, who you think I am. Who do you think I am? That's not who I am. I'm going to show you, and I'm going to stand my ground. That's a completely different stance than, where am I? Who am I in the story here that's between us or running around us? And that brings different answers. That definitely, you can get clearer about what might be happening for the other person. You may not know exactly, but it definitely feels like a more opening stance to be able to understand perhaps where the other person might be coming from. Um, you know, my old
Perhaps.
my old reaction is just a good old knock on the head and like, quit being a dick.
And sometimes that's the right move. But it in the centropic world that I'm a member of, there's this notion of integrity. And when you take integrity as a shape, the root is integer, it's wholeness, like it's the whole of you. And so when you honor all of your shape, some part of that is actually standing firm. In fact, all of that is standing firm in, this is the shape of me, and that's the shape of you. And I will honor the shape of you, but I will not do, if you are impeding on who I am, then I will meet you. And it doesn't need to be with force. It can just simply be with leaving. It can simply be with, a heart, like a word, whatever it is. But this notion of, we have to honor each other's shape. And often what we're witnessing is trauma in coming out. And what's coming through for me is, if it's not all of us, it's none of us. And so we have to welcome everybody. And maybe some other people need more tending. And maybe other people aren't really fully stepping into all of their integrity and being truthful and honest. Maybe they haven't been in those spaces to be held. And so the idealist in me says, like, if I can stay true to me, then I'm in my power. And then can I hold space for you but I have to put my own oxygen mask on first. So if it's an impede on me, so like somebody is really coming at me, and then there's a hold on that, and that's where the strength, what Bucky Fuller would call tensegrity, where you balance the tension with your integrity, the hold, the shape. And shape's really important.
I really like that, holding integrity. It reminds me of a moment that I had recently with another human, where I really needed to put a line in the sand and really hold the integrity of my shape. And the story of it seemed like a fight. But what came through me at that time, in that moment, because I did have the awareness to know that it was trauma that was coming through, and that I just happened to be being projected on and whatnot, was the sense of, this is not a fight. This is an invitation.
Ooh.
And it changed the way I stood. It changed the way I listened. I still needed to be fully in integrity, but it wasn't like you against me, polarities. It was, I'm here, this is where I'm standing, and you are more than welcome. You're more than welcome.
I love that. And how much better would the world be if we had better boundaries? And I'm not talking about physical boundaries. I'm just talking about we truthfully owned our boundaries and what it is that we're wanting to give to the world and what we would love to receive from the world. And it's not more money and things like that, but it's, I want to be in a nurturing family or in a community or with a partner, or I want to bring words to the world. But often we don't set good boundaries, and then we have this, it's like we've shrunken a part of our shape, and maybe conditioning does that. And the first step is actually putting good boundaries up. And as soon as you do that, you've created the conditions for engagement. This is what I stand for. I stand for respect. I stand for this. And if we can tune into each other and hold space for each other, and that's when reciprocity starts flowing and resonance starts happening, and you start witnessing each other. But if we don't set those boundaries properly, then the terms of engagement are off from the get-go. And I really feel like boundary setting is a skill set that we all need to develop. I've had to really learn it. My wife kicks my ass when I don't do it properly. Seriously, she does. She's just like, nah, you need to go back. And I'm like, okay, cool. So now my default is like, no, until it's a hell yes. And that way is, it just helps put, here is the shape of me meeting the shape of you. And I'm really sure of these boundaries and I stand for them. And it's magic from that.
There's such magic living into our hell yeses, full body yeses. It clears the path. Generally, if you're living into a full body yes, it's meeting your boundaries too. The boundaries have, that you've laid out. The intention's there. The integrity's already there when you can feel that full body yes in yourself. Yeah, that does seem like something like, lessons or teaching about boundaries, and perhaps it's the same with books and learning any sort of practice. I mean, we can learn it logically, all up here and ingest it, but it doesn't change until we embody it and we experience with the fullness of our being what it's like to be on the edge of a cliff and somebody you trusted not reaching out to help you, and how are you gonna, what's gonna happen. You almost need to be there, in my experience, to learn absolutely not, this is my boundary, this is where I am, here's how I'm going to take care of this and my family and whatnot, to really, I know my boundaries, like I'm not going to miss a Monday, but to know how I'm going to allow myself to be treated will change my interaction with everyone in the world.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you're doing a disservice to yourself. Like, it's like mistreatment to yourself by not setting good, clear boundaries. And sometimes we're just unsure about it. And other times there's power plays and there's struggles and then we sort of shrink them. But if we set better boundaries, it would be a really good first step. And it's not hard to do. It takes courage. But as soon as you do it, you create transparency. Like, there's a cleanness to the way that you communicate. The terms of engagement are above board. So there's no behind the table, under the table kind of sinister things. It's just everything above board. And that's once again why I love little kids, is they just say what's on their mind. Like, just instantly, your breath stinks. Okay, thank you, noted. Whereas we dance around it. And so it's just a cleanness, like there's a directness to it that I really love. And I feel boundary setting is an art form that if people got better at, they'd start to see differences in their lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Steve. Last question here. How do we reconcile where we are with where we want to be with grace and ease?
So what's coming to mind is the ripple effect. And so there's always a tear on the ripple. And so I'm then drawn to seeing like this Instagram veneer of like people who project this image of it's all sorted, but I know what's going on behind the scenes, and it's, you know, they're a douchebag to their partner, or they're this or that, whatever it is. And so we reconcile first by cleaning up our own backyard. And so that's being in integrity in all areas of your own life, and understanding where in the shape of you that you're out of alignment. And that reconciliation then, when you do that, gives you a strong foundation which to build on. So like you put an oxygen mask on a plane first, you then can +1. And then I'm by living in that fullness of you, and then it's finding the others, as Timothy Leary would say. It's just finding your ways into communities where that you're welcomed as your whole you, and finding the other human beings to thread together. And this is where communities like the Flow Genome Project, Tropic World, Hedge School, Signature Sound, those spaces are where you find your like-minded souls, and they're not echo chambers. So you've got to have the spaces where we will look at all different vantage points. So they must be diverse. So find your ways into diverse, find your ways into conversation with Indigenous, find your way back to your own lineage, find your way to speak to people in all walks of life, different to you. And so being in integrity with yourself, cleaning up your backyard, then finding your ways into different communities and diverse communities. So you're kind of living into your own integrity, but then there's this appreciation for all of the other beauty that's out there. I definitely think being locally involved, because if you were to follow the principles of nature, nature always acts locally. And so be involved in your local community, tend to the local, you know, grasslands and farmlands, and pick up things, like do the simple things, be a really good community member, make the backyard of your community beautiful, like tend to it, like it's this you're stewarding it, and really just is to find beauty.
Well, that was beautiful, because I feel like everything that you just described there, Steve, was like the action of an actual ripple effect, in the sense of sometimes when people think of a ripple, it's like, I want to be that wave that, you know, goes for 1,000,000 miles. It's just like all the way out there. But when you were describing it, what I sensed was just, you know, where the drop is, and that first ripple, that's the first ripple. Start at home, start in your backyard, your boundaries, then move to community, your neighborhood, the people around you. That's the next ripple. Then move to learning about different cultures, different people, integrating, get into those conversations. Then move into weaving these spaces and places together. And that's the ripple. But really, all just this beautiful description of like, start at home, start at home. And it's like, we're all trying to get home. We're leading each other home.
Yep.
And you can start at home too.
What it gives you is the first step. And that's all you need. And like Antonio Machado said, you lay the path as you walk. But it must be, and you mentioned it before about like this embodied learning, like learning theory agrees on one thing, only one thing, is like be in motion. And so we lay the path is like, often it's the first step, it's the hardest. Like the heaviest door in the gym is the heaviest weight in the gym is the front door. So getting there is the hardest part. But once you're there, and the next step and the next step is you're just going. And so the ripple effect is really clean up your own backyard. And from that, practices, it can be very simple things. Like I learned to meditate by doing 1 minute a day. It was easy, 1 minute. And then I started doing 3, 4, 5, and then it just continued. And then it just became this process where if I didn't do it, my wife was like noticing, have you meditated today? I said, no, because you're being an arsehole. Go do it. Noted. Boundary, clear communication. And and there's magic in that, and there's magic in other human beings seeing you as well, because you have the lived experience. So, for example, what we talked before at the start, saying speaker, listener, you need so you feed, like often we manifest things to the world, but we need to complete the loop and have it come back. And so we need the things we can't see, our blind spots, also folded back with love towards us. And so that's, find those people as well. And often they're at home because they can say things and you love them anyway. And I'll say it, oh, yes, okay, that's truth, wrapped in an insult maybe, but
I love it. I love it. There is such a weight lifted off the shoulders when you think about all you need is the first step. Do the
Yep.
one step, the one step. And if you think you need 10, go back to the first step, just do the first step. And it clears the board. You could be anywhere. Just do one step, one step. Steve, thank you so much for showing up on the How to Be Human podcast. This has been so fun. I've loved hearing your experience of the How to Be Human questions. I love that you helped inspire these questions come out of me and through me. And this has just turned into an organic conversation, continuing to dance. Who knows what's going to happen next? But I appreciate you creating Hedge School and creating a space where I get to share my voice as well. And thank you so much.
It's been my absolute pleasure. And you know what it feels like is coming through is the drumbeat of those questions and the cadence of them is bringing a song that you are almost composing with these conversations. And I don't know what it looks like from a sonic landscape point of view, but I know that it's having its way with you, because listening to the first episode and to the latest episodes, that there's a depth to it when you keep the beat of the questions, and they just start to spiral deeper and deeper. And it's a gift to receive your voice and words in the inbox. And I just want to honor the fact that you stepped across the threshold and just went for it. And it's just yours now. Like that, it's delightfully yours. That's what I love about it. It's not like this, oh, it's just an adjunct over here. No, it's just, it happened in here organically. So it's like we planted a couple of seeds and we just have these beautiful plants growing together. I love it. So I wanted to honor that experience.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate being involved in this process and a part of the process of creativity. And what it feels like to me is just this beautiful space where I'm held and I get to hold and join you in listening to, sharing, and discovering my own signature sound. So thank you.
Thank you so much.